It's been a busy couple of weeks for law-related news. The thumbnail shows some hockey players boozing it up after a game. So we'll be talking about the four NHL players, one Swiss League player charged for their involvement in an incident after the Junior World Juniors in London a few years ago. But we'll also talk about a couple others. We'll talk about what I'm calling a climate lockdown that's ongoing right now as you watch this in Nova Scotia, as well as the plea bargain struck by two of the four men held in custody after being arrested at the Coutts blockade. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So as I said in the preamble, we're going to cover three timely, kind of hot topics that are law-related. The World Juniors, five players who were charged with a sexual assault from a number of years ago. We're going to talk about the climate lockdown ongoing in Nova Scotia, and then thirdly, we're going to talk about the plea bargain struck by two of the gentlemen held in custody from the Coutts blockade. So, dealing first with the Team Canada hockey players, there's five of them have been charged. I'm sure you've seen it all over the news. I don't need to name them. I don't need to go into great detail of what they're charged with, but just to give a very brief synopsis for anyone who hasn't been following the case closely, London Police Service did a press release earlier this week and explaining the charging of the three of them. One individual charged with 2 counts of sexual assault, the other 4 with 1 count each. It all arises out of some partying and drinking that was going on after one of the games. One individual invited a young lady who he'd been drinking with up to his room. Apparently she consented to that. And of course, I stress, this is from her point of view. This is from her version of events, which is what the media has been running with. We'll talk a little bit about the dangers of trial by media and relying completely on what the media says is gospel truth. But the allegations are that she went up to the room consensually with this individual. There was some sexual activity that was consensual, but then he invited 4 other members of the team up, and then things got non-consensual according to her after that. She didn't agree, as I understand it, to the other 4 guys and some of the stuff they were doing. Allegations of some very demeaning behavior, including spitting on her in connection with sexual activity. So all over the media, it's a really big deal, but what I think is really worth focusing on and reiterating is just because they've been charged and just because legacy media says they're guilty doesn't mean that they are actually guilty. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be convicted in a court of law. We have to remember that in Canada, we have the presumption of innocence. And the presumption of innocence is really something that we should hold precious. It's something that prevents people from being wrongfully convicted. It prevents injustices. Now, it's not a cure-all. You're always going to have wrongful convictions no matter what, but this really helps limit it. And I think it's one of the key factors that makes our justice system, warts and all, still one of the most fair systems, one of the best systems in the world. It's far from perfect, but if I had to go before a court, I would rather go before a Canadian court than many others. Probably an American court, United States, would be another one that I'd be willing to go to, especially because the United States, in my view, has vastly superior jury selection laws than we do in Canada. But getting back to the presumption of innocence, we have to remember these men are presumed innocent, and the Crown is going to have to try to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to be convicted. It's not a foregone conclusion that they did what they've been accused of. There seems to be a prevailing attitude of, well, we have to believe women. No one would ever lie about a charge like this. Well, unfortunately, human nature being what it is, that just simply isn't true. And I mean, that's why we have the presumption of innocence, because over centuries in English common law, they saw that there's more than meets the eyes to accusations, and wrong or false accusations are made. Just look at a couple examples that we can see in the media. I think a perfect example is the Duke lacrosse players incident. I think that was from about 2006. Google search it, look up the Wikipedia article. This is a group of young lacrosse players partying at a house. I mean, I don't condone some of the behavior they were doing, but there's a difference between immoral and illegal. They were accused of sexually assaulting this young lady. Long story short, it all ended up being completely false. It was a huge scandal. I think one of the prosecutors even did some jail time as a result of this. I mean, that's a clear example, and it's something that's kind of comparable to this, and where you've got some high-profile sports heroes getting accused, and everyone was saying they were guilty as sin. Everyone was saying they should go to jail forever, and then once the deposition started, it turned out that it was a complete fabrication. Also, think back to the whole hijab cutting incident in Canada. That wasn't that long ago either. I think it was 5-6 years ago, although time flies. Maybe it was longer ago than I remember. I know it was for sure during the reign of Justin Trudeau. Again, everyone's saying, no young girl would ever make that up. Why would she make that up? This must be true. Canada's full of racists. People need to go to jail. Well, surveillance footage was reviewed by police, and lo and behold, complete fabrication, never happened. So these things do happen. I'm not saying that this case is a fabrication. What I'm saying is we don't know. We weren't there. The media people weren't there. They're taking what this young lady says to be the truth, and maybe it is the truth, but maybe it isn't. And also be very cautious of commentaries of, well, studies show that the vast majority of sex assault allegations are true. Well, just step back for a minute and think, how do these researchers know that they're true? Especially when a lot of these people, they also say that these cases, the majority of them aren't reported to police. So these cases were never tried in a court of law. They were never investigated by police. But researchers are saying they're true. Well, they don't know that they're true. They're just judging themselves without the benefit of due process, without a full trial where lawyers are able to question and really flesh things out and get into the details. They're just deciding themselves that it's true. So I think when you consider that, these studies are not helpful in determining. They're not helpful at all in ascertaining whether, in fact, the majority of sexual assault allegations are true or not. The very nature of them is generally only the principals, the people involved. They're the only ones there. It's he said, she said. It's very difficult to know what actually happened in those circumstances if we think about it objectively and set aside biases. I mean, I have my own biases. I think hockey locker room culture is vile and disgusting. So a certain part of me thinks, yeah, this has a bit of a ring of truth to it because I've been in those locker rooms. I've heard the stories. You know, maybe it could be true, but we need to set that aside because, you know, just because there's a stereotype doesn't mean it was true for those individuals. So we have to wait and see. This is going to be years in the process before we see what the courts actually decide. And even then, we won't really know what happened. We'll just know whether the Crown was able to satisfy a judge and maybe a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that these individuals were guilty. Now that brings me to the climate lockdown in Nova Scotia. That's what I'm calling it. Now, we posted this on social media earlier in the week, and a number of people felt that I was being hasty, disagreed with me, of course saying like, well, don't you agree with shutting highways when it's dangerous? Well, I think we need to look at the details of what has been done here. This isn't just shutting of highways. I mean, I have no issue with shutting down highways until they're clear. I mean, that's just prudent, that makes sense. Keyword, until they're clear, but that's not what's happened here. What's happened here is Cape Breton has declared a state of emergency and said that everyone is directed to shelter in place. That means you're not allowed to leave your home for 5 days. Regardless, your street could be completely clear today. You've got to stay till February the 10th because of this lockdown. So I think we need to be careful and look at the specifics of this. I'm not criticizing the closing of roads until they're clear or until they're safe. I'm not criticizing the additional powers given to police to tow vehicles that are stopped on said roads during the day, because under normal circumstances, as I understand it, they can only tow vehicles if they're out overnight. obviously it's appropriate to give them the power to tow vehicles out of the way during the day so that these roads can be properly cleared. It's the ordering people to stay in their homes. You're not allowed to go out for a walk, not allowed to go out snowshoeing, not allowed to go out cross-country skiing if you want to go stretch your legs. You're not allowed to go to the store, say all your roads are clear and you didn't have 5 days worth of groceries in your home. You're not allowed to go down to the store to get something because the store is also ordered closed. All businesses are ordered closed. Only emergency services are allowed open. So that's what I take issue with, is this broad sweeping, you're locked in your home, you're not allowed out because of some snow. Now, granted, it's a lot of snow, but this is a continuation of the concept that was really begun with COVID-19, where the state is your parent. We're taking away all agency from people because they're just irresponsible children. We're locking them in their homes. And also, there's no objective measure or standard. Like, I don't know how much snow needs to fall before you get locked in your home for 5 days. Is it 50 centimeters? Is it 100 centimeters? Is it 10 centimeters? Also, is it just snow? Are we going to see it's too hot out, stay-at-home order for 5 days until it cools off? It's too sunny, the UV index is too high, 5-day lockdown, you're not allowed out, all businesses are closed. I hope viewers see where this could go and why it's concerning, and this goes back to the alarms I was trying to raise during COVID, saying that these are terrible precedents that are being set, and now we're seeing that set precedent being put in use. So that's my concern and my criticism of the lockdown, not the closing of highways, but the locking of people in their homes that's going on in Cape Breton. And interestingly, the Premier of Nova Scotia, he's called it a PR stunt. He seems to disagree with it as well. So I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb to say there's some problems with this. Now, that finally brings me to some news that just came out today. People may or may not have seen this, that 2 individuals from Coutts have entered plea bargains today. They've admitted their guilt, they've given up the right to trial, and pled guilty. And now, my understanding is what they pled guilty to is absolutely not the conspiracy to commit murder of an RCMP officer charge. It's simply unlawful or careless use or storage of a firearm, which is still a serious offense. Now, it's not something that warrants the amount of time they've been in jail. In Canada, you get 1.5 to 1 credit when you're in pre-sentence custody. So they've been in roughly 2 years. So it's about the equivalent of 3 years of jail. You know, careless storage or careless use of a firearm is not 3 years of jail. Could be around 6 months of jail, roughly. I mean, depending on various factors, depending on prior records or not. But, I mean, careless storage of firearms is dealt with quite seriously in Canadian law. So I expect they're probably going to be out of jail, those 2, already by the time you're viewing this video. We'll put some links to some of the Twitter or X postings that we got this information from. We'll see there's probably going to be some formal legacy and alternate media sources giving us more details on this, but I thought it just worthy of mentioning that in case people hadn't seen that, and just to highlight, like, these individuals have now admitted they did at least something wrong. So a lot of people are seeing it as a victory. I mean, it's a victory that these men are going to be out. They get to go back to their families. Maybe not so much a victory in that they've admitted they did wrongdoing, but maybe it was right. I don't know the facts of the case. I'm assuming that by the fact that they pled guilty, it's because they're owning up to what they did wrong. And bringing a firearm to Coutts in contravention of the Firearms Act laws, I mean, that's something that you just can't do, and it would be appropriate to plead guilty to that. Hopefully that it also indicates that the case isn't that strong, and that's why the Crown Attorney offered such a generous plea bargain to these individuals, and hopefully the remaining 2, they'll be free before too long. But that's about all we have time for tonight. Again, this is not legal advice. These are more me just kind of covering some legal news here. If you need legal advice, you always need advice that's tailored to the specifics of your situation. So you can call a lawyer, you can call another lawyer or myself. My contact information is listed below. We appreciate the show suggestions. I'm working on them. Specifically, quite a few people wanted the deep dive into the ruling on the Emergencies Act invocation. working on trying to do that, but it's going to be a few weeks before I'll be able to actually give that the time and dedication that it deserves. But feel free to keep the suggestions coming. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media.